दोस्तों गुड इवनिंग। लेट्स गेट क्रैकिंग ऑन अनदर वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग टॉपिक। और इस बार मैं आपके साथ बात करने वाला हूं ऑन द सिख्स एज सोल्जर्स। वन थिंग यू मस्ट रिमेंबर दैट इन इंडिया, which is a land of peace, honey, and Ji Hazuri. When I say the word Ji Hazuri, it is because the Hindus, who are the main constituent of India, were ruled by the Muslims for 900 years. Now that's something to remember. And then the British ruled India for 200 years. So that makes it 1100 years. And that's a long, long period. It's an eon. And during this period, there were some Hindu kingdoms in India, yes, but they were all subservient to the overall monarchy, which was the Muslims. The Muslims, of course, didn't treat the Hindus that badly or something, but they did have a distinction. And the distinction was that you are the slave and I'm the king. So now what actually happened at that during that period was that the Hindus accepted everything which was thrown at them under the guise they took it as a pretense or whatever you say, or maybe the covering of the weaknesses and saying it is the will of Lord Krishna. This is our karma. And here is where the difference comes between the Sikhs and the Hindus. The Sikhs are an amalgamation of some Muslims who converted to the following of Nanak and a large number of Hindus who also converted or became Sikhs, followers of Nanak. And then came a time when the persecution started in Punjab by the Muslim rulers, notably Aurangzeb. And at that time, there was a call to arms, a baptism, and on Baisakhi Day, that is in the year 1700, Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th and the last Guru, created what is called the Khalsa. Now, this was a militant arm, and they did not believe in the pacifism of the Hindus. Now, I have already pointed out that the Hindus were the slaves, and I have not been able to justify how 250 million Hindus could, give, could be governed by a few lakh Muslims. Now, that's a point which will bug every historian. Why should it happen? The Hindus at one stage were great conquerors. We had men like Chandragupta, Kanishk, who ruled over Central Asia, and why suddenly this thing happened that they became slaves of the Muslims for 900 years? So there has to be a reaction, and the reaction came in the form of the Sikhs. And I can tell you they're the most warlike race in the subcontinent. I think the only persons who can really match them are the Gurkhas. But the Gurkhas do not have the same religious zeal in fighting, and they never had a fight with the Muslims, that is the Mughals, while the Sikhs led the battle against the Mughals. They were not scared. They fought and gave that famous Hammurabi's quote, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. All you all know who Hammurabi was. He was a ruler in Mesopotamia, in Iraq. He was a great ruler, and this is the laws of Hammurabi. So, gentlemen, the Sikhs followed that and they fought the Muslims. They did not give up. There was a time when there was a price on the head of a Sikh. I think it was 50 rupees. It was a lot of money at that time to bring a Sikh dead or alive. If you go to the Sikh museum in Amritsar, you will see the history of the Sikhs and how they were tortured, but they never said die. That is the ethos how the Sikhs developed over the years. And once the Muslims were defeated and sent away, the British took the Sikhs, fought with the British. Now, in all the battles in the subcontinent, the British had a walkover. They had some very great generals like the Duke of Wellesley, who later became the Duke of Wellington. And he was the man who beat the hell out of Napoleon at Waterloo. But he won his spurs in India by beating Tipu Sultan neck and crop, hollow, and then the Marathas in three consecutive wars before he was called back to England to deal with Napoleon. But there were other generals who took his place, and then at that time Lord Dalhousie, I think it was, who decided that the time had come to subdue the state of Punjab after the death of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Now the Sikh bravery or soldiery, as we call it, organized, started during the time of Ranjit Singh. He was a great visionary, and he brought in generals like Allard, who had worked with Napoleon, to the Punjab, and they trained the Sikh army, which became a match for the British. And as the record goes, like Plassey and Buxar, where the Hindus and the Muslims and the local people just threw up their arms and defeated by the British, the Sikhs fought tremendously well. And at Mudki, in the famous Battle of Mudki in 1845, and the Battle of Chilianwala at 1849, they had the better of the British. In Chilianwala, under General Sher Singh, the Sikhs defeated the British. And that was the time when the British commander, Lord Gough, was removed from command by the Duke, by the Viceroy, rather the Governor General, and replaced by Sir Charles Napier. Napier had to come from England, and it would take him about 2 months to come. But just about so the power of the Sikhs, the British commander had to be removed by the Governor General after the defeat at Chilianwala. Now, Chilianwala is important. It's on the banks of the Jhelum River, and this was the place where Porus met Alexander. So it's a very historical ground, but the Sikhs carried the day. But overall, they couldn't sustain, and ultimately Punjab was annexed. But the fighting prowess of the Sikhs impressed the British. So what they did, they disbanded the Bengal constabulary. The soldiers from Awadh and other places were all told, "We don't want you, go home." And they were replaced by the Sikhs. And at one time I can tell you, the Sikhs constituted almost 40 to 50% of the British Indian Army. That is the East India Army at that time. And the love with the Sikhs, which the British had, started in 1855 after the annexation of Punjab. Now we must remember one particular thing. When the British took over Punjab and defeated the Sikhs in the famous Battle of Gujranwala, they did not persecute the Sikhs. The generals of the Sikh army were rehabilitated, given small jagirs and a pension, and even Raja Dilip Singh, the emperor who was ruling Lahore, was a small boy, was taken away to England. He was not killed. He was brought up along with the children of Queen Victoria. But he didn't get his kingdom back. But the British had a lot of regard, that means, for the Sikhs. And so they adopted this course, which was a friendly course and not an antagonistic course. Now, what happened in the Punjab after that is came the 1857 mutiny, and in that mutiny, which was of course by a few regiments of the Bengal army, Awadh and other places, who revolted against the British rule on the basis of some cartridges, and some of the kings at that time and the Nawabs, they joined them, including the Rani Jhansi, not to make India independent or make India one composite place. Their whole aim was to get their own kingdom back. That's all. The Rani of Jhansi is a great heroine. I like her, but she was fighting only to make her son the king, the adopted son as the king, to be recognized by the Governor General, which she was not ready to do. So she fought and got killed. And in the famous siege of Delhi, it is the Sikhs who breached the Red Fort and entered inside. At that time, the mutineers had proclaimed Bahadur Shah as their leader. I couldn't understand how they could choose such a imbecile man who was not a fighter, nothing, is very old, and all the time he was making only writing poetry and singing songs and with the women and the young girls. But then they made him their head, and he paid a terrible price in the sense he was removed from command. His sons were shot dead, and he was taken to Rangoon and allowed to take only one wife. I think he took his youngest wife there and died there. So the Sikhs' loyalty to the British was reinforced with this particular battle, and the Sikhs, earlier to that in 1855, were recruited into the British East India Army, and they were called Rathre Sikhs. There was a man called Captain Rathre, and he was the man who first of all incorporated the Sikhs into the British Indian Army. Gentlemen, a lot of people have said that the Sikhs were mercenaries. Yes, they were mercenaries, no doubt about it. But their bravery transcended all realms. You know, they were like in Russia, you had the Cossacks, the great fighters, and then you had the great fighters like the Mongols. The Sikhs were in the same class, but they didn't have a leader. And so it is the British who gave them leadership and used them for their hold over India. So the linchpin of the British Raj were the Sikhs who constituted the East India Company Army. And after 57, I think the government in England decided that the company rule should end and the crown should take over, and Queen Victoria became the Malika Hind. But again, the British went about it everything in a very, very orderly manner. They allowed the kings and the nobles to retain their kingdoms and their nobility. That is why the Nizam of Hyderabad, Patiala, Kapurthala, Jind, Baroda, all of them were allowed to rule their small kingdoms, while of course the major portions like the Maharashtra presidency, or for that matter the Madras presidency, Bengal and Punjab, including the United Provinces, were taken over directly by the crown. So it was a very wonderful way, a two-tier system. Overall suzerainty was with the British, but some Indian rulers were allowed to rule their kingdoms and make their own laws, but they were not just independent, they were subservient to the imperial darbar, that is the darbar headed by the Governor General. Later it became the Viceroy. The Governor General was replaced by the Viceroy. And from 58 you had the Viceroy till 1947 when the last Viceroy was Lord Louis Mountbatten. Well, gentlemen, there are a lot of people who came in between because it's a long period. The British had so many people coming in as Viceroys and Governor Generals. But the one facet of their policy was to keep the Sikhs in good humor, look after them, because they were the linchpin of the British Raj. Now, this is something which very few people will understand, that the British ruled India through the number of Sikhs who were in the British Army, because the East India Company Army then was rechristened as the British Indian Army. And in 1893, the first articles of war were published and everything was codified. The Sikhs fought extremely well in the Afghan wars against Afghanistan. They also fought in the First World War, the Second World War, and it's on record that thousands of Sikhs wearing the turban died fighting for the Raj. Now, there are two opinions about it. What could the Sikhs do? Many people have said, oh, they were mercenaries, they shouldn't have fought. Well, what would you do then? You'd do nothing. You would just become uh, one of the vegetative existences. And those who are warriors, they fight for the love of fighting, and the Sikhs were warriors. Now, most of the Sikhs are warriors. Even if they are the Mazhabi Sikhs, the scheduled caste, they are also warriors. Even now in the Indian army, the Mazhabi Sikhs form the backbone of the Sikh light infantry. They are known as the scheduled caste Sikhs, but they are part of the Indian Army. And the Indian Army at that time has inherited the same ethos of the British Army and has continued, with one exception that many of the exploits of the Sikhs during the days when the British were the paramount power in India are now ignored. This is a very sad occurrence because when you say you're honoring a soldier, you honor a soldier for what he does, for his fighting abilities, for his bravery, his courage. And the Sikhs, by and large, were in that class, except one class of Sikhs who are called the Papas. The business community, they were not the fighters, they were just doing business. But the other Sikhs, the Jats, the other castes were great fighters and been recognized in history that they were one of some of the greatest fighters in the world. I would like to draw your attention to the famous Battle of Sargarahi. Now, this is a small hamlet in the northwest frontier, and there were two fortresses close by, and which had to communicate with each other, and they used to do it through this fortress at Sargarahi, which was being manned by 21 Sikhs. It was a communication unit. And then, at that time, the local Amir declared jihad against the British, and a battle began. And one of the most famous battles, 21 Sikhs faced almost 5 to 10,000 Muslim soldiers. They held their own and killed almost 1,500 before each one of them died, fighting to the last man, the last bullet. Now, this is something which is mentioned in the UN report, but unfortunately, I have done the Staff College course and other places. There is no mention of this act of bravery of the Sikhs. Maybe, the government feels this is something imperialistic, but you can't deny the bravery which is associated with it, or the tactics which the Sikh use. Well, all the Sikhs were suitably rewarded by the British, and that's also a fact of history. But, gentlemen, the fact remains that the Sikhs have always been fighters. That's the crux of the issue which I'm coming to. And it is only when the British realized that in 1945 that the Indian army was suspect and they couldn't rely on the Indian army to subdue India, that they decided to leave India. And much of this credit should go to Subhash Chandra Bose, who had a lot of Sikhs within his forces. And in fact, I think the majority of his force consisted of Sikhs. This started with Germany, when the Sikhs, many of them were taken prisoner of war by the Italians, taken to Italy, and there Subhash Bose had gone, indoctrinated them, and they became the Free India Legion. They owed allegiance to Subhash Bose and to Hitler. I mean, people can disagree with it and why they owed allegiance to Hitler, but Hitler was the overall man at charge at that time, and that was the best thing to do. Otherwise, you get your head cut. Nobody wanted to do that. And they fought very bravely, the Sikhs in Europe, in France, both for the Indian army and even for the German Wehrmacht. In fact, in the North Atlantic, many of the Atlantic wall fortresses were manned by the Sikhs. Those Sikhs who had joined Hitler were then caught, put in chains and brought to Delhi for trial. But then things had changed, the atmosphere had changed in the country. And Achin Lake, in one of his messages to Lord Attlee, the British Prime Minister, told him that we can't hold India now. We have lost the support of the Indian army. When you say the Indian army at that time, I can tell you 45% of the force was the Sikhs. And the Punjabis, they were the ones who were following, who were the main components of the British army. So at that time, we must be very clear in our mind that the Sikhs gave a lot for 90 years or 100 years they were with the British army and expanded the British Empire. They went for fighting in the famous Boxer Rebellion in Beijing and made the Chinese run like cats. They were there in the North African campaign. They fought in Mesopotamia in the First World War when General Allenby was the commander and the Turks came face to face with fighters who were absolutely daredevil and strong. Even the great Aurangzeb had to face the wrath of the Sikhs. And so he also realized that everything is not honky-dory. I mean, I'll discuss this in a later way because the relationship between Aurangzeb and Guru Gobind. And Guru Gobind, as I told you, had given the color of the martial torch of the martial race to the Sikhs. And they remained a martial race. They recognized by the British as a martial race. Now, whether I believe in a martial race or no, or you believe or no, it not doesn't matter. Just as you say, the Cossacks are martial race. Well, so were the Sikhs. So martial race means they were always used to fighting. Not that they were more stronger or more efficient than the other races, but they were the men who were always prone to fight and fight. Because they were in Punjab, they were facing all the invaders who came in from the northwest frontier, and they were the ones who gave battle to the British, and the British recognized their worth and made them part of the Indian army. When the Sikhs joined the army during the days of the Raj, they go one promotion extra compared to the other ranks or the other men, other races. And the British, of course, confined their recruitment only to a few select groups in India. Or you may agree with it. I also probably won't agree with it. But that is the historical fact. And as the saying goes, the taste of the pudding is in its eating. And so the Sikhs gave their best to the Raj. And the Raj, so long as they were part of the Raj, it prospered for 200 years. And once the British Indian Army, which consisted basically of Sikhs, gave up support and Achal Lake realized it, he informed Attlee and the British decided to leave gracefully. I think Gandhi had much to do with it. A lot had credit should go more to Subhash Bose, who really revitalized everybody. So, gentlemen, came independence in 1947, and the Sikhs at that time, I think, were about 33 to 34% of the entire strength of the Indian Army. Sikhs also came into the Navy, they came into the Air Force. But the regiments in the Army, I can tell you that the Sikh regiment is the most decorated regiment in the Indian Army. So it continued honky-dory. The Sikhs fought in the 47-48 war and the Sikhs fought in the 65 war. That's a very crucial factor because that time there was a massive thrust which had been made in the Cham-Jorian sector by the Pakistan Army. And at that time, the thrust was enforced by the famous Patton tanks, which had night vision devices, and the Indian Army had nothing. At that time, the Chief of the Army Staff, General Chaudhary, had told the Western Army Commander, General Harbakh Singh, to withdraw beyond the Beas River because Punjab would be lost, and better to retain the area behind the Beas River because nobody can stop a armored thrust. Harbakh Singh did agree, and the rest is history. Another thing is that I was in school at that time, and my father tells me later that there was a non-Sikh regiment facing Pakistan earlier in the Lahore sector. When the Pakis counterattacked, this regiment ran away and the villagers caught them and beat the hell out of them in Punjab. This is a fact, not much brought around. And that is the time when Harbakh Singh steal the defenses, putting in the Sikhs and the Jats there, and the Indian army could move towards Lahore. But precious time was lost. The war lasted only, I think, 2 weeks and it was all over by the shouting. Shastri died. But the Sikhs at that time was greatly appreciated, and Indira Gandhi, who was the Prime Minister at that time, decided that time had come to reward the Sikhs, and so a separate Punjabi-speaking state was carved out of the erstwhile Punjab. In 71 war, again it was a great battle in which the Sikhs were the stars. In fact, the entire campaign in Bangladesh was planned out by General Jagdish Singh Arora, who was the GOC commander of the Eastern Command, and he was helped by General Jacob, who was a Jew. So it was going fine. Everything was fine. So the problem here is 84. That is the hallmark, rather, where the Sikhs broke their oath, I would say, or whatever it is. They were forced to do it. 84 is a time which is a lot has been written about it. I will just digress on it briefly. Basically, Indira Gandhi was an extremely insecure woman. That's number one. So she had thought that she needed a bogey to win the next elections. And she thought it's a good idea to create the Sikhs as an anti-national force and then win the election and say, we are fighting these things. But she wanted to keep everything under control. She thought it wouldn't blow up, but it blew up. Sant Bhindranwale, I have no regard for him. He was actually brought in by Indira Gandhi to counter the Akali party. But he was a man who became a Frankenstein and occupied the Golden Temple, and a lot of arms and ammunition was smuggled to him. Now, Kushwant Singh in his book has clearly said it, that the entire complex was surrounded by the paramilitary forces, the BSF, the CRPF, and yet the arms went in. How did they go in? They went in with the connivance of Indira Gandhi. That is a fact of history. As I told you, she had already wanted to create a bogey of a Sikhs as terrorists so he could win the election. And there were so many ways Bhindranwala could have been brought to his knees. But they didn't want to follow that. And she instructed the army chief at that time to organize the attack on the Golden Temple. This is the most stupid thing she could have ever thought, and she got damned in history for it. The attack duly took place, and I can put on record that General Sundarji Singh, who was the commander, Western Command, was not in favor of it. He had told Indira Gandhi, "You are playing with fire." He said, "Here's a warlike community, and you're going to antagonize them." But she thought they are so few, the Sikhs, she'll be able to control them. The army moved in, Golden Temple, and hundreds of Sikhs died. The Sikh Saifki was greatly hurt, and 2 Sikh soldiers then assassinated Indira Gandhi. I think I have no comment to make about it. Probably they were young soldiers, very young, who were influenced by what had happened in the Golden Temple. So the Sikhs became the punching bag of the Congress party. Rajiv Gandhi, who took over, made some stupid statements. I think we can't make any accusations because we got no evidence. But I think he basically wanted some action to be taken against the Sikhs for killing his mother or whatever it may be, and then started a massacre, a genocide. 10,000 Sikhs were killed. Now things went from bad to worse, and then started the insurrection in Punjab, that is the terrorist movement in which the Sikhs began to ask for a separate Sikh state. Now, if you look at these things, there are so many people, who are talking. I have particularly one gentleman from Jaipur, who's a senior officer, has a lot of glee when he says, the terrorists have been caught, Sikh has been caught and all. I don't see why he should be so happy about Sikh terrorists being caught or something like that. It's better to go to the genesis of the problem. Here are the Sikhs who fought for the Raj for 200 years, who fought Aurangzeb for decades, and they were not going to give up. And now you come around and say that they're not national and anti-national or something like that. And who created this? That's the crux of the issue. 10,000 Sikhs died. I think not more than 10 or 12 people have been sentenced to some sort of imprisonment. Nobody has been executed. Nobody got the death sentence. Well, that's a wonderful thing. You kill 10,000 Sikhs and then say there's nobody to be given the death sentence. Wonderful. And then you say the Khalistan movement has come up. So it's anti-national. Wonderful. That means you want to have your cake and eat it too. Well, gentlemen, I won't digress more on this thing because things have changed definitely now, and thanks to the BJP and then the Modi. Then the Modi, the visionary, and when the BJP, even when Vajpayee came into power, the taboo of the Sikhs in the army was taken away. I remember I was in Shillong, I think in um, 2000, I don't recollect which year, and there was a lot of talk, that there are too many Sikhs in the higher ranks, too many Sikhs. I mean, why should anybody talk like this? Too many Sikhs? They were there because, well, they deserved it, and they had joined the forces where the other people were not joining. But luckily, all that stigma has gone now, and a couple of Sikhs have become the army commanders also, chiefs of the Indian army. But credit only go to Narendra Modi, who gave the Sikhs their due. The Congress party after 84 has been wavered, and the Sikhs have had a very, very tough time after that. And now we have a Frankenstein because the British government, the Canadians, the Americans are stoking the embers, to put India and Modi on the back foot. Well, gentlemen, here is the account of the Sikhs and the Indian Army. I think there are two things that go together. Sikhs and Indian Army, they go together. Sikhs and the Indian Armed Forces, they go together. And the Sikhs have been fighters. They're the only race in India who are fighters. When we talk to Gurkhas, they're not really all Indians. They're basically Nepali Gurkhas. And their loyalty is suspect. They are the real mercenary soldiers. They are recruited by the British Army also, by the Indian Army. But now after the bringing of the Agnipath scheme, I think there are hardly any Nepalis coming from Nepal to join the Gurkhas, to join the Gurkha regiments. And that is where uh, our good friend Narendra Modi, I like him very much, committed a big mistake on the advice of General Rawat. So, gentlemen, these are rambling thoughts. Let's not forget the Sikhs are a warlike race and nobody can win the battle with the gun with them. So the best method is to have negotiations. Somebody may be feeling very great glee, like the man who makes the programs from Jaipur. He feels greatly thrilled when some Sikh terrorists are killed. I don't think you should be having any glee because you are catching the dragon by the tail. And once the dragon starts firing, people sitting in Jaipur and all these people talking arrant nonsense will have a lot of answers to give. Gentlemen, I think now you had a fair count of the Sikhs and their role as Indian Army and their contribution. And I will sum up by saying that the British Raj owes its sustenance to the Sikhs who constituted the major component of the Indian Army. Well, they were mercenaries. I won't deny it. They can deny it. And that's part of the game. The mercenaries all over. The Cossacks were mercenaries. And so were so many other races. And the Sikhs were also mercenaries. But that was a period where nothing else was possible. And during the days of the Raj, Punjab was the most prosperous state in India. I have a long association with the armed forces, more than 100 years, sense of loyalty to the forces. My great uncle fought in the Second World War, as I told you, as a captain. Earlier to that, my great grandfather, even great great grandfather, Bhuta Singh, was also a soldier. So part of life, and we have served together for over 100 years. So I, at least, you can't claim that I'm anything against the Indian Army or something. I'm all for it. But there has to be a course correction in the Indian government. And the 1984 riots, somebody must atone for the crime which has been done. You just send about 10, 15 people to jail, give them some terms of imprisonment and all that, and forget about it, is not the way things are going forward. Even now, there should be a commission appointed which go into all those people who are still alive, and there's a need to give the death sentence to few of the people. You can't get away by saying that justice is done and now what the Sikhs are doing is all bull. Thank you, gentlemen. I hope you like my video. Please share it with your friends and come back for more. Goodbye, God bless, and Jai Hind.